Welcome to the lecture on profit rate and prices. In this lecture, we will finalize the Marxian framework, where we will basically you will basically introduce the Marxian concepts. Starting with the next lecture, the focus will shift to the how Marx describes economy with those concepts. Of course, the concepts themselves give some idea on the way Marx observes or understands the economic system. However, our main focus was in last three lectures building the terminology and the model, Marxian model, role model, which he uses to understand economic system. Again, we will also continue to introduce some new terminology and some new elements of the model in the next parts, but the most important and core elements will be completed in this lecture. This lecture is on profit rate and prices. In short sense, we might also call this part where we introduce the price theory of Marx. Up to this point, at many places we have assumed exchange value and prices are equal, although I have also mentioned that it's very well possible for individual commodities to have a price higher than the exchange value or lower than its exchange value. And profit rate is also not necessarily equal to the rate of exploitation, which we have seen the last time, actually mostly not equal to the rate of exploitation. And that would be a very important element of Marxian analysis. And profits are not necessarily equal to the surplus value generated in a sector also. Before continuing, actually, I should mention a little bit background discussions of the discussions evolving on Marxian price theory. First of all, I should mention that the part of Marxian framework you have seen in the last two lectures, and the part you will see today, in your case, there was only 1 week between the introduction of the previous part and this part. In real life, the people have to wait for 17 years. Marx has introduced his complete price theory in Capital Volume 3, and the previous parts of the framework, exchange value, exploitation rate, the surplus value, the capital, constant capital, variable capital analysis, all of that was done in Capital Volume 1. And between those two books, there are 17 years. And to make things worse, also when when the Capital Volume 3 was published, Marx was dead, basically. The book was published by Engels, who has edited Marxian manuscripts. But that's my impression. If you read Capital Volume 3, you can see at certain points the arguments or arguments of Engels also to certain chapters. And my personal impression is he is a very clever person, but in many ways Engels did not understand in full sense Marxian price theory. I'm not claiming that. I think Engels is a very important economist and social scientist and very capable. But of course, between me and him, there has been more than a century, and I have ability to read several different arguments and views on Marxian price theory. And that, I hope, has improved my, I think, has given me the advantage to look to the Marxian price theory in a more, let me say, from a different angle. And I think that angle is actually shows that actually Marxian price theory is pretty much sufficient to explain how exchange values lead to the prices and why exchange values are relevant and important. However, when the price theory of Marx was introduced in Capital Volume 3, many people, both from the non-Marxist, other schools, as well as Marxian school, many people thought the price theory of Marx was incomplete. It did not show how exchange values and the prices of the commodities are related to each other. Moreover, there are some people from the non-Marxist school who think that the price theory, the Marxian price theory introduced in Capital Volume 3, shows that exchange value is completely worthless concept, and whole Marxian framework has collapsed as Marx introduced, as the Marxian price theory is introduced in Capital Volume 3. Well, there is another big discussion that also originated from Capital Volume 3, that's on the falling rate of profits, and we will discuss this also. That discussion is more exclusively within the Marxian school. The people outside of the Marxian school did not participate in it, but also very big and important names in the Marxian school had objected to that theory also. In other words, actually, Capital Volume 3 has been controversial for both people in Marxian schools and basically, and also the arguments there are used by people outside of the Marxian school to criticize Marxian framework. So the view, the people who think that Marx was not able to show how exchange values and prices are related to each other, call this problem transformation problem. It is, from their perspective, the problem of transforming the exchange values to the of commodities to the prices of the commodities. And there has been also several Marxists who aim to show how this problem can be solved, how this incompleteness of Marx can be completed. I am personally on the camp that who think that there is no problem. The price theory is not exact, of course. That it doesn't show. It doesn't let's say show. Now, certain cases can be presented in which the model has certain problems. But this is true for all models almost. No model works under all conditions. And I personally think Marx does not create the model to make actual calculation in real life. Basically, he just shows on average how the economy works. And on average, I think the model works very well under very marginal conditions. I at least think under very marginal conditions. The model Marx introduced becomes incomplete, and even for these cases, completing the model is not that difficult, in my opinion. Today we will see first. First I will introduce you the Marxian transformation, how Marx has introduced the price theory. And then we will see the most famous critique of Marx on the basis of the transformation problem or price theory, who is Böhm-Bawerk. He's a non-Marxist economist, and he actually belongs to the Austrian school of economics. I personally think actually inside of Marxian school there are much more valid critiques, which I think are important and people should think about that. So Böhm-Bawerk, in my opinion, this is not the most, in my opinion, not the best critique of Marx in terms of the price theory, but he's the most famous one. Because he is the most famous one, I want you to see him. And the book he wrote, the critique, is one of the books that is considered very important in economics, especially for the people who like the Austrian school of economics. Well, the Marxian critique is actually the most famous Marxian critique is Berkowitz, and if you are interested, read it, and we can discuss it with you. But I will only keep Berkowitz to the people who are really interested in, because we will already see Marxian critique of an important Marxian critique on the Marxian framework in the falling rate of profits, but Berkowitz's critique is relatively more complex than the Böhm-Bawerk's critique. So, and that critique we will see will also be more complex. So basically, I didn't want to include another critique to the lecture, which will be very complex. I think from the critiques made by Marxian perspective, the critique on the falling rate of profits is more important. Anyway, so we will see after we see Marxian price theory, we will see Böhm-Bawerk's critique, and then we will see the response to the Böhm-Bawerk's critique, and it is kind of, the response will be partially my response, partially a response of a famous, actually, Marxian economist, and his response is also available. You can read that response. Basically, the name of that person is Hilferding, basically, a German economist. So all three economists, actually, we covered today are German. So let's start. So where does this complex Marxian theory, why do we need the more complex Marxian theory? That's the first question. Why can't we just assume exchange values are equal to the prices? So in order to see that, we should first assume a hypothetical economy where there is no capital mobility. So if capital cannot move from one sector to another, then each sector will earn its own surplus value and produce its own profit. So surplus value earned in one sector will be profit of that sector. Sectors will remain that have more constant capital, less variable capital, will have less profit. Why? Because profit is created by the variable capital. So if exploitation rate is 100%, basically only the amount of the amount of surplus value will be equal to the amount of variable capital in that case. We will see that in more detail in a minute. Sectors that contain less variable capital will earn more profits, basically. I mean, less constant capital will earn more profits in that case. Here is the case. Let me write this to the Excel. Well, you can see here that if a sector has 100 units of constant capital and 100 units of variable capital, basically, in the end, surplus value will be 100 units. So if we need more non-labor inputs, but at, let's say, 200 units of value, if workers at 200 units of value, in that case, if in that economy the value is shared 1-to-1, basically, then surplus value will be 100, variable capital will be 100. And note that exploitation is expected to be same in all sectors, because if the workers get for the same amount of value adding process for the same amount of effort, basically, and we assume same effort will result in addition of same value for the most workers. And if workers work more intense, basically in a sector, add more value as a result, but earn less, they will leave that sector basically. We will continue in the next parts.